Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. A nickel for your thoughts. Who is on our nickel? Jefferson, thank you. What building is on our nickel? Monticello, thank you. That is because Thomas Jefferson is the greatest architect America has ever had. It's in recognition of his ability as an architect that he has adorned, as has Monticello, our nickel since 1938. He built Monticello, Little Mountain in Italian, for his bride. And he designed it and built it. And it's recognized today as one of the greatest buildings ever built in America. But not just that. He also designed the white-domed Capitol of Virginia, which became the standard for every state in our nation and for Washington, D.C. Not only that, when he was involved with the early stages of our nation's building, he encouraged George Washington to move our first capital from New York, where it was, to Washington, D.C. because D.C. had swamps and heat and malaria, and he hoped that our congressmen wouldn't stay there very long. They'd get out of that place. He was a smart man. And then he went ahead, of course, and helped structure and design the early stages of Washington, D.C. But not just that. He was also the architect, an architect of our nation. He was our first Secretary of State, our second Vice President, and our third President. While President, he doubled the size of the U.S. for $15 billion with the Louisiana Purchase. While President, he sent Lewis and Clark out to discover the rest of our great nation and come back with new ideas so we'd understand more about ourselves and our nation. While President, he established West Point and did something unique. He had the oath for each West Point cadet to be to our Constitution, not to the President. Because he wanted our military to be responsive to the people and not to a government or a faction in Washington. But not just that. He was also the architect of freedom for our nation. This 6'2", red-headed architect gave us a blueprint in the Declaration of Independence, where he told us, you'll recall, that we are endowed by our Creator to have certain inalienable rights, including them a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that concept is the foundation stone for this, the greatest nation that history has ever seen. And he gave us the blueprint. But not just that. That document then became the inspiration for our Constitution in the 18th century, for the Emancipation Proclamation in the 19th century, and for Martin Luther King's dream speech in the 20th century. That one document drawn up by that mind, that magnificent mind called Thomas Jefferson. But not just that. He also got through the statute for religious freedom in Virginia, which meant that we have freedom of religion in this country. Because in the early days, each state had rights of religion, and they were raising taxes off everybody to give to their favored religious group in their state. And he got that removed. So he's the father of religious freedom as well. Jefferson truly was our greatest architect. And when you think through how much he has given us and the world, you realize what a great man he was. But to me, the greatest thing he gave us was a thought that came in a letter he wrote just several years before he died. And that thought was this: I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against all forms of tyranny over the mind of man. That, to me, is the mark of the greatest architect man has ever seen. Because that is the essence of dynamism, of human magnetism and growth. Without freedom, this nation, this world, would be cast into the shadows and into darkness. And this one man, an architect, as a builder, an architect of our nation, and the architect of freedom, is the man who gave it to us. So if at any time you should find a nickel, I ask you to think of this, the greatest architect, and of the freedom that his blueprint has given us. And touch myself.